Since we had to try to survive One Piece as a JoJo character and got sort of far, what if we were to fit within their logic? What if Dio Brando had instead lived in One Piece? Now, considering the thematic consistency between the two, having a character like Dio transition over into One Piece is actually fairly possible, considering what had made Dio who he is, which had been facing poverty and facing abuse from his father. If that was in the same context here, there are multiple ways that this goes. Well, firstly, his father, Dio Brando, had saved George Joestar I, and that's how Dio had ended up in this advantageous position because, oh, I'm moving on up onto the Joestar Manor. But once you put fate to the side, Dio could have ended up in just multiple types of poverty without being set up for a better position in the future. And in the context of One Piece, there are a lot of areas in the world that are just not rich like that. I think Dio would hold this animosity towards the general world, but there's a specific animosity he would have for characters like the Celestial Dragons, per se. But I don't see him as someone who would want to be a liberator of sorts, like the way that Luffy consistently is. Dio is the type of person who wants to stand above all, along with his willingness to take a lot of what he believes to be disrespect on the chin. And I guess that says a lot about his potential in the future. So for example, let's say he could take either position, right? Either position, be it pirate, marine, or some sort of third option of sorts. But the idea is that he has to see his road to victory somewhere down the line to be the one above all. It's not even just the pirate king, but genuinely the one who stands above every possible thing. Now, to be this one above all, he's going to need a power that puts him above everyone. And that could be a devil fruit or hockey or both, who knows. Imagine the killing intent of Rob Lucci, for example. What do you think would happen if he wanted it all for himself rather than being contracted for certain things and working for the world government like that? Like, that's what I think Dio would be like, and mostly that just falls in line with his character. But I think also when it comes down to it in terms of power, I also feel that Dio would most likely prioritize having a devil fruit over hockey due to the fact that it'll allow him a large power difference in such a short amount of time than training a skill over a large course. So that'll be the first thing. Let's establish that he's going for a position first, and he's hoping to find a strong power that'll help him get it over others. I think that as a youth, he's got to be somewhere, you know? I don't know who'd be helpful, but considering that he's going to be some nameless character in the world, he might just take himself over to whatever pirates or marines are willing. Now, over time, he'll learn about things that are like the warlords, Yonkos, and all that mess. I want to think that if he's a pirate first, it's most likely a lot easier for him to work towards trying to be a warlord as opposed to already being a marine and then later establishing himself as a pirate. But at the same time, Dio is this extremely manipulative person, and he's a god at playing into facades. So let's imagine this, right? Dio starts as a marine because it's an established government job, a lot easier to deal with being inside of, and it's most likely a more consistent life for him to build upon. Now, over time, he's training himself to outperform all of his fellow marines, and he's working to plant his thoughts of essentially defecting from the Marines to have this Dio pirate crew. I imagine that he gives them the idea of, you don't have to answer to these Marine leaders who are extremely corny and or weak, and instead being your own person who sometimes have to contribute here and there to helping the world government. But this wouldn't be possible until Dio finds himself an acceptable devil fruit, and I don't think that he's someone who'd go on to try to work for a CP9, considering that Dio isn't the one to physically train to that extent, as he mainly enjoys being strong above others without the look of trying too hard, essentially. So over time, Dio is searching for the one true devil fruit that'll help him the most. While this is happening, Luffy's adventure is probably doing it all, though I think if Dio was to hear about the Straw Hats defeating everyone they come in contact with, he's most likely not going to try to pick that fight in the current state that he's in. Like, that'd be too dumb of an idea for him to even go about that. And Dio doesn't really choose losing battles on purpose. So if he were to know that Luffy has defeated someone who ranks higher than him, then it's probably not worth that attempt. You know, he's like, oh, I'm not going to mess with that guy. Dio is most likely going to try his best to find a Logia fruit or a really high quality paramecia fruit that would most likely support him in the way that he needs. I'm just not sure as to what that'd be, especially if he's to spend a lot of times with Marines and find out about devil fruits and all the animals have and all that they got. And it's like, oh, okay, these are all Logias. He would most likely want to find a good Logia fruit that's on par with that, which would most likely be impossible because we've seen what the lineup has been so far. Like, word on the street, this nameless guy wants a whole Logia fruit to himself. Who's gonna help him? Like, it's crazy. He'd have to collect some bounties here and there, so maybe he'd go about learning hockey because it's needed to take down a lot of the characters with genuinely good bounties. If he never finds the devil fruit that he's looking for, which is very possible, he'd have to go all in on hockey and or understand the position he's in and try to find someone who's willing to teach him Fishman karate for the sole purpose of having something over all the devil fruit users, which definitely sounds like Dio. But I think that this would be some of the most agonizing times Dio is living in, considering he doesn't care about any of these people and he's solely focused on his own goal. He might just drop all this and just rank higher in the Marines and attempt to marry into being a celestial dragon if possible, you know, which I think in most cases the dragons would believe that they're just so far above him and it's like, oh, look at this Marine, like he thinks that he's got it like that. But Dio is literally too good at talking for him to not mess with the idea of this happening. You know, the first option of genuinely becoming the one above all in every way possible would be a damn near impossible task, considering that he's not being given a power that can shoot him so far ahead of the entire world. You know, having a stone mask in JoJo was one thing, but his stand could also manipulate time. He had two of these like rank surging abilities. Like, it's crazy. That's an ability that scales over the majority of the franchise, the ability to stop time. And alongside, he was capable of so much physical strength that he was mostly unrivaled, you know, besides Jotaro. One of the things with One Piece is that there are no individual characters who are capable of taking out entire crews if the other crew is on par with the characters. You know, that sounds like bad phrasing probably, but imagine this, right? Someone like Luffy is extremely strong because he has a great crew behind him that he trusts like that. Even the villains like Blackbeard roll deep, like he has multiple people with him who are also really strong. Now, Dio has an extremely individualistic mindset in general, and it would most likely improve a bit to where he can get a team to work with him, but it wouldn't have the depth and the power that a lot of these actual pirate crews have. Because give an example, like for Crocodile, right? I think that Crocodile has better team building and teamwork exercises going on for himself instead of Dio, even though both of these characters are extremely selfish. Now, Dio's strengths are his ability to manipulate and implant insidious ideas that cause the world to work in his favor, but this type of stuff can catch up with him fairly well, and he doesn't have the facilities to stick it out for the long haul. He just doesn't. I think Dio's original goal of taking over the Joestar Manor, as simple as it is, might be the move in terms of One Piece, finding some sort of rich character or marrying into it somehow, because the grandiose Dio that we're familiar with is because he's achieved such unattainable points of power that characters dream of. If he's forced into living this type of life that he is, I don't think that this would point him towards genuinely achieving the dream of being someone who rules over the world. I think that his opportunities wouldn't put him in the right areas, and alongside that, he doesn't have the type of greed that we recognize Dio at, because this would be younger Dio transitioning over into a little bit older than younger Dio. Like, it's just not the vampire Dio that we know, nor is it the one in part 3 that we know too, which isn't bad, you know? If the point of this to see is like, oh, could Dio become the king of the pirates if that was his main goal? If that was the original point, that would be a whole different thing. It would still play out sort of in a similar fashion, because I don't think he's got it like that. I don't think JoJo antagonists, for the most part, don't have good team building exercises and stuff like that, or team building abilities, and or the mentality that's required to be a genuinely good leader of sorts. That's kind of the point of them. I think that at best, if we were to look through all the antagonists possible, you got like what, Pucci? Funny Valentine? Most likely. This isn't about power scaling or strength. This is purely working off of how the characters work and interact with those that need to help them with furthering their own personal goals. And Poochie in this case is a lot more, I guess Poochie's case is a lot more self-explanatory, considering that he's got what it takes to be like this, I think, for the most part. Because Poochie, a lot of the time, he puts himself into the right positions to further his goals to the highest possibility. And I can't say that others say the same. You know, a lot of these other antagonists will most likely shoot themselves into the foot and just ruin a lot of potential that they could have had because they just don't have the mindset for it. And it's not that Dio doesn't have what it takes. Like, it is. That is true. Like, he doesn't have what it takes. But I think that it's just the fact that some characters aren't meant for this and that they'd never get to that point. Like, but that's not a bad thing, because look to actual One Piece, right? Like, do you think Crocodile could be king of the pirates? Like, be honest with yourself. Like, it's probably not the case. What about Law, Enil, Kaido? Like, dude, it's like, yes, very strong characters. I get it, all extremely important names for their times, and even then some, but you sort of get the idea of why certain things won't be possible with them. And they even have like character arcs in the show that you'll see like, okay, this is why they failed at their goals, and this is why they don't have it like that. And you sort of understand it. Like, it wouldn't be that crazy of a thing. And I think that for the most part, it just would go down to their placement in the story, about how they're going about this, how are they executing their dream in general. And even if the Dio, for example, had been made the protagonist, you'd most likely see how the story would just make him fail, and it would just end up being a story of like, oh, hey, this is why Dio wasn't made for this job. Here's an entire journey that showcases why he sucks at this, and yada, yada, yada. And it wouldn't be that surprising. But I'm going to play into like the idea of this scenario, right? Let's say that Dio does get a good Logia fruit. Just, it can be really whatever. Let's just say he gets a good one. Let's say that he's furthered his haki in general. He has to compete with the rest of the pirate world to be able to get to that point that he wants to. Even if he was to roll deep with certain groups and yada, 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 that's the case. The best thing that he could do is be the scummiest pirate possible, sort of in the way that Blackbeard is. And he goes about claiming the bounties on certain pirates and yada, 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 because he has worked himself up to be a little bit below the warlords. But the biggest thing that he could do is to find out a reason why one warlord has to be taken down and then take him down because of that thing. Or, you know, he could fall back behind Luffy's directions and stuff like that and play cleanup crew and go after certain people that have already been taken down, which is legit like Blackbeard like. But the issue is, you know, seeing how this works. If he's following in similar steps as Blackbeard or something like that, eventually he's going to have to cross paths with him. And again, I don't think he would have a roster that deep. So the idea is that he would most likely have to work for Blackbeard if possible. And if that's the case, and we know that thematically speaking, Blackbeard is probably never going to succeed in the end of it all, then Dio is most likely also going to be the one that falls behind. And he never get to a point where he's like the Gorosei or Imu or something like that. Like he's just, that's just not possible, because alongside that, like all the issues that we have here, they don't want someone like that. They just don't. Like, there's certain things that they're okay with, like certain people can come up and talk to them and yada, yada, yada. But the whole idea that we're going to have this new joining member who's going to, like, they can already see how he moves and how he's been working himself up through the ladder. And they most likely just wouldn't allow for that. He would need something that's literally extremely Blackbeard-like, to where he's like, oh, okay, not only do I have a freaking good Logia and I have good haki, like not great, but like it does like pretty well. He would also need the ability to have more than one devil fruit, which there's only one character that does that. There's not something with like a complete imbalance in this world. And the only thing that would actually help, that's not that would help him get this complete imbalance in the world and lets him be stronger than everybody else, is the ancient weapons with all the poneglyphs and all that types of stuff. And like now you'd have to be telling me that, yeah, no, Dio is going to get all the poneglyphs. He's going to find the right person for it. He's going to have his own Robin, and he's going to end up getting the ancient weapon that's going to let him beat everyone like that. When we've already seen that, yeah, this is an extremely hard feat to even get to. And the reason why certain characters like the Straw Hats keep on coming into contact with the poneglyphs and all that is because they're realistically the chosen ones. And Dio most likely isn't. This would be another franchise where fate is not on his side, except that he'd be in an even worse position considering that he'd be nowhere near as important considering the stakes. But yeah, thank you all for watching. That's my take on if Dio had lived in One Piece, and I think that if we had chosen maybe a character like Jotaro Kujo, which he is all about like learning and stuff like that, like he wouldn't even have the mentality of, oh, let me be the king of the pirates. Like that's something that would work really well, because he could get extremely far in the franchise and there wouldn't be some sort of grandiose goal that we would have to worry about. But if there is something that people want to see where it's just like, could a JoJo character do this thing? Be sure to comment it. I would love to know, because, you know, these types of scenarios and what ifs are actually fairly interesting to me. So I'm down. Hopefully I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, peace out and Godspeed.